What is going on, bottom line viewers? It is Mitch here of the Bottom Line View, here to help you with your starts and your sits for your fantasy football team this year. And we're starting here in week number 1. There's no more exciting time in the NFL calendar than week number 1. And for fantasy football players, we're all looking at our teams like we have championship quality squads. But after week 1, we'll have at least of a little bit more of an idea how legitimate our teams actually are. Of course, you don't win fantasy championships in September, but if you do collect those victories in week number 1, week number 2, early on in your schedule, you will be making your way into the fantasy playoffs with a shot, and that's all you need in fantasy football to win the fantasy championship. So let's start off in week number 1 with the quarterback position. I'll give you about 5 starts and 5 sits at every position. And once again, just like past years, I'm not talking about the elite of the elite. Of course you're going to start Aaron Rodgers. Of course you're going to start Todd Gurley. I'm talking about the borderline, the wide receiver 3s, the flexes, the top 10 to 15 quarterback range. So let's get into it. The quarterback position, Philip Rivers is one of the starts of the week for me. Philip Rivers does play the Kansas City Chiefs, one of the worst passing defenses in the NFL from a season ago. I think the Chiefs have pretty much gone throughout every single corner in free agency and brought them on a visit, and they're still not satisfied with their back end. We all know they lost Marcus Peters. Eric Berry may not play in this game. He is banged up. The Chiefs' secondary was just straight up horrible last year. I really like the Chargers' direction on offense. He has more weapons this year. Antonio Gates is coming back to help out the tight end situation with Hunter Henry. You have Tyrell Williams. You have Mike Williams. Of course, Keenan Allen. A solid run game. They need to score points, the Chargers, in this game. They also have the fact that Joey Bosa is out on defense, which might put a little bit more pressure on Philip Rivers to carry the team this week. So I like Rivers at home against the Chiefs. Deshaun Watson. Yes, Deshaun Watson was injured, but you should still play him this week. I know he plays the Patriots. I know he plays the Patriots in New England. But last time he played the Patriots, he was fairly successful. I'm not saying he's going to be that good this time around, but I do believe Deshaun Watson has 2 game scripts. If you don't know what a game script is, it's basically the way that the game is going to turn out this week against the Patriots. Rather, 1, the Texans are doing very well. It's a close game, and Deshaun Watson is therefore having a great game. Because if Deshaun Watson does not have a great game, they have no chance of winning. Now, 2nd, he's maybe not having his best game. The defense isn't playing as great as they would like. The Patriots are up in the lead. The 2nd is that, hey, Deshaun Watson, he'll have to come back and throw for a lot of yards and throw a lot of footballs. So that means 1 or number 2, either game script equals fantasy points for your fantasy team, no matter how healthy Deshaun Watson is. I trust him this week. Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor's playing the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm not the biggest fan of the Steelers' defense. The Steelers' defense, to me, has been overrated for seasons now. I think it's solid, but I actually really like what I've seen from the Cleveland Browns offense this preseason. We've seen what Jarvis Landry can do on this team. David Njoku looks like he's primed for a year 2 jump. Carlos Hyde is the best running back they've had there in years. So they have a pretty good team, and then you throw in Josh Gordon, who he's on a snap count, but he should play more than not. Tyrod Taylor has the weapons. He's a safe floor because he can scramble and get those rushing yards for you. He's at home in week number 1 with Hugh Jackson looking to prove himself. He's versing the Steelers with a high potent offense who needs to score points. Therefore, the Browns need to keep up. I think Tyrod Taylor, the Browns will be pumped, and you'll be happy to start him. Andy Dalton. They're playing the Colts. If there's any time ever that you want to start Andy Dalton and you don't necessarily trust your quarterback situation, maybe you waited late to pick one and you don't have the best matchup, then Andy Dalton is the guy for you. The Colts secondary is, in my opinion, the worst in the NFL. It's straight up awful. This is the week for Andy Dalton. I don't see anyone that can cover AJ Green. I don't see anyone that can cover Tyler Eifert. And I really don't see anyone that can take John Ross deep. I think Andy Dalton has one of the best games of his season this week in week number 1. Jared Goff. The Raiders are a weak secondary. They lack confidence because their leader of their defense and their best player, Khalil Mack, was just traded. This could be a blowout if the Rams get up early, Jared Goff should have success against this weak Raiders defense. Now, the quarterback sits. On the other side of things, we talked about Phillip Rivers. The other side is Patrick Mahomes. I do think Patrick Mahomes is a very talented quarterback, but I just don't trust the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes this season. I think he is a quarterback that needs to go through growing pains. This is a young kid versus a top-notch defense on the road. I know that Joey Bosa is not suiting up, but they still have Melvin Ingram and one of the best secondaries in the NFL. I'd just rather not risk it. Jimmy Garoppolo. I actually think the 49ers can move the ball in this game against the Minnesota Vikings, but it is the Vikings defense at home. They were number 1 last year, even above the Jaguars, for a reason. Now, he may make up for it, Jimmy, in garbage time because the 49ers may be trailing and he's coming back and throwing for some yards in that regard. But if you have a better option, then use it. Marcus Mariota, week number 1 in Miami. As a Patriots fan, I know how difficult that is to go in there and win. It's just a different type of hot. It's humid, and it's tough for a player in week number 1. Plus, we have no idea what this offense is going to look like. Rashard Matthews is still banged up. They don't have the greatest receivers in the world, and Mariota looked horrible in the preseason. So I think the Dolphins' defense, actually, just to add on to that, is pretty underrated in the pass rush and the secondary department. I think that the Titans should lean more on their running attack in this game. Derek Carr. You didn't spend high capital on Derek Carr in your fantasy draft, so there's really no reason you need to start him this week. But if you were looking at a different quarterback, maybe he's the guy on your bench. Week 1 isn't the greatest matchup in the world. He's playing the Rams. They're one of the best pass defenses in the NFL with Aaron Donald back, Ndamukong Suh on the defensive line. Then you have in the secondary Talib and Peters. Ben Roethlisberger. This might be a shocker to people that he's playing the Browns, but Ben Roethlisberger typically hasn't been great against the Browns on the road. Last season, he had a decent game, but it wasn't anything special. There's no Le'Veon Bell, so it's kind of throwing a wrench into things for the Steelers offense. They're going to have to rely a little bit more on Ben's shoulder, but also he's just not great historically on the road. I just don't necessarily trust Ben Roethlisberger to have a great game. I just think there are better options, very similarly to Jimmy Garoppolo this week. Now we go to the running back position. My biggest start of the week is Alex Collins. The Bills had the 30th best run defense in DVOA last year. At home, the Ravens are really good. It's one of the toughest places to play. The Bills are likely going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL, and they'll likely struggle to score, which means the Ravens will have a big lead. They'll pound the rock, and Collins will get it done. Royce Freeman, one of the rookies, I think is going to have a huge year this year for the Broncos. And the Seahawks defense, I think their weakness is going to be stopping the run. They're very light up front. They're not very big. And I think Royce Freeman will be the do-it-all, go-to workhorse back from week number 1. James Conner. We talked about Le'Veon Bell a little bit. James Conner is going to be the starter. The Steelers treat their backups as if they're workhorses every time. We saw it with D'Angelo Williams. We even saw it with a guy like Toussaint in the past. I mean, James Conner, he's going to get a ton of work, especially if the Steelers jump out to a lead. Mike Gillislee, the backup to Alvin Kamara. There's no other running back on this roster other than Mike Gillislee and Alvin Kamara. Kamara can't possibly take all those carries. If you're in need of a flex or a running back, especially in a standard league, Gillislee could get in the end zone multiple times this week against the Buccaneers in what's expected to be a blowout. James White. The Patriots will look to get the ball out quick versus the Texans like they typically do because of that pass rush. James White, other than Gronk and Hogan, is the only real trusted target that Tom Brady has. Of course, there's Burkhead. Sony Michel probably isn't going to play. James White will probably have a big role in this game, especially in the passing game, versus linebackers in space that aren't too great in coverage. Running back sits, LaShawn McCoy. The Ravens' run defense is one of the best in the NFL, especially when Brandon Williams is playing. The Bills' offensive line is one of the worst. If you have something better, start them over Shady this week. Shady's still going to get a ton of volume, so you'll have a good floor, but he's not going to have a very high ceiling this week. Alfred Morris and Matt Breida. Both the 49ers running backs, not a fan. The Vikings surrendered the fewest fantasy points last year to the running back position. Sony Michel, Kerryon Johnson, Rashad Penny. All three of these guys, not really a huge fan. They're all backups right now. You got to wait and see on them to see what happens. I believe in all their talents. I took them all in multiple drafts. I think they're all very talented players, but this is the reason why you drafted them is not for week 1. The reason why you drafted them is for their potential. So sit them this week. Wait it out. The only guy I could really see having a big role this week is Kerryon Johnson, depending on the way the game goes, but I doubt it. Chris Carson. Carson is facing a top run defense in the NFL in Denver. Von Miller. This is one of the best front sevens in the NFL. I actually think Russell Wilson is going to have to go to the air in this game to get it done. Jamal Williams, the Bears front seven, to me is elite. It's right there with the Broncos. It's right there with the Vikings, the Jaguars. The Bears front seven is awesome. And that was before adding Roquan Smith and Khalil Mack. They are just going to absolutely destroy this Packers run game. They're going to force Aaron Rodgers to be one-dimensional, and I just don't see any way that Jamal Williams is going to have a good game. If you have a Packers running back, go with Ty Montgomery. Wide receiver starts, Brandon Cooks. Last year with the Patriots, he put up 6 catches, 149 yards, and a touchdown. That was a huge stat line. He hit them deep multiple times. They didn't really improve in the corner position much. I know they brought in Melvin, but Cooks should still have a big game. And I think that in week number 1, after paying him that contract and trading a first for him, Sean McVay will try and get him involved. Emmanuel Sanders. Sanders was Keenum's favorite target in the preseason. He ran over 60% of his routes from the slot. Similarly to Adam Thielen last year, Case Keenum's favorite target. So I expect Emmanuel Sanders to be that guy for Denver this year. And I also expect it to be week number 1 where the Seahawks don't have a great slot corner. Jamison Crowder. I believe that Crowder will be the number 1 in Washington this season, and he'll avoid Patrick Peterson in this game. And like I've said many times in previews and thoughts about the Arizona Cardinals in general, I don't love the other corners on the Cardinals team besides Patrick Peterson. Chris Hogan. In week number 1, Hogan is on the short list of proven targets that Tom Brady really has. He'll see a bunch of targets because Julian Edelman is suspended, and he scored 2 touchdowns last year in week number 3 against the Houston Texans last season. We should see Chris Hogan maybe get another touchdown this week against the Texans. He's definitely going to get a ton of targets in the red zone once again. Plus, the Houston weakness on their defense is their corner play, especially on the outside. Kenny Stills. This is a sneaky start for me this week. Devontae Parker is not playing. Kenny Stills is the clear number 1 and always has been the clear number 1. In 3 games without Devontae Parker last season, Stills saw 23 targets, averaged 17.6 PPR points per game. He's a worthwhile flex. Wide receiver sits. Sammy Watkins. We don't know how involved in the offense Sammy Watkins is going to be. We don't know if he's the second receiver, the third, the fourth target. Sammy Watkins has ability, but in week number 1 against one of the better secondaries in the NFL, I just can't trust him in my starting lineup. Amari Cooper. Now, right now, people are saying I drafted Amari Cooper in the thought that he wouldn't be the same way he was last year. Well, he's playing the Rams. Don't panic. You're going to have to sit him this week if you have a better option. But I'm not saying that Cooper's going to do absolutely nothing, because he probably will do a couple of things in this game. But just don't panic. He plays Talib. He plays Peters. It's one of the best pass defenses in the NFL. It's a bad matchup. Marquise Goodwin. Xavier Rhodes is a top 3 corner in the game. That's a lot to handle for Marquise. In week number 1, he might get a catch or 2 deep, but I can't see him getting anything electrifying or worthwhile for your team. Tight end starts. Jordan Reed. He's back. He's healthy, and when Jordan Reed is back and healthy, you play him. He's too talented not to, and I think he's going to have an immediate connection with Alex Smith. Plus, the Dolphins gave up the most points to the tight end position in 2017. Trey Burton. I think Burton will be the initial receiver that the Bears try and get involved, and I think he will initially click with Mitchell Trubisky. He's playing in the Travis Kelce role in the Matt Nagy offense. I think the Bears will actually make this game a lot closer because I think their offense will actually be able to move the ball. Jack Doyle. Doyle shredded the Bengals last season for 12 catches, 121 yards, and a touchdown with Jacoby Brissett. Imagine what he can do with Andrew Luck this year. They don't have Vontaze Burfict in the lineup, the Bengals, so I think Jack Doyle is going to be solid. On the opposite side of things, Tyler Eifert, he is the Bengals' #2 target, especially in the red zone. They have been saving Eifert all preseason and offseason and maintaining his health. He's a very good player when on the field, and you should start him this week against the Colts. Ricky Seals-Jones. The Skins had the 6th worst defense versus tight ends last season. They don't have any great safeties to really man up on Ricky Seals-Jones, who's a very underrated receiving target. He could even end up being the #2 guy behind Fitzgerald in this offense in terms of receivers. And the tight end sits. It's week #1, and the tight end position is weak, so I don't really have any tight end sits. There's a couple bad matchups, but if you drafted your tight end, you probably are going to start them. And if a guy like Ricky Seals-Jones is not picked up in your league, go out there and pick him up. If you have Tyler Eifert and Jack Doyle, and maybe you have another guy as well for competition to see who's better, start the guy that I put in the start section, quite obviously. Good luck in week #1. All the best to you guys this fantasy season. If you enjoyed, hit the like button, subscribe for more fantasy football, and comment below any questions you have for me. It's Mitch of the Bottom Line View, and peace out. See you in week 2.